content creators are finally able to talk about Dragon Age the Veilguard, and what the hell, they are coming out very, very impressed in Bioware's new title. Now, I got absolutely shit on by a couple of people in my last video because I was saying that this game looked absolutely amazing except for the art style. So I'm going to try to take a little bit more of a skeptical approach while listening to these content creators talk about the game and looking at the gameplay. But overall, like I mentioned, very, very, very impressed in terms of what people have played. But I think the reason people are so cynical about Bioware right now is because of the last two big titles that they released, being Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda. Both catastrophic failures in terms of one, which is Anthem, a live service disaster, straying completely away from single-player stories that Bioware does best, and Mass Effect Andromeda, which was a complete failure in terms of they just couldn't even figure out the engine that they were working on. There were so many issues with that game in terms of what it looked like, in terms of the character writing, in terms of how it performed, that with that game and Anthem, it kind of shot down a lot of people's faith in the studio as a whole. But now with Dragon Age Veilguard, at least from the impressions that I've seen so far, which I'll share here in a second, Bioware is course correcting a lot of what they've done in the previous games and really delivering a product here that I think is looking very promising as of right now. They're even releasing this game at $60 and not requiring you to use the EA launcher. Both of these things, with them being published by EA, is very surprising to me, and another way that it seems like they're course correcting here. But I still want to be cautiously optimistic about this game because in my last video, I definitely leaned a little bit too much into the hype because the art style is not sitting for me. The art style and the way that this game looks, I think it genuinely looks absolutely terrible. They want to do this for the quote-unquote modern audience. That's the same audience that Concord went for, and this is not going to be good in terms of me trying to get fully immersed into a game that is hard to even look at. I'm a little bit worried about that. The Kunari designs look absolutely terrible. The Darkspawn designs look absolutely terrible. But aside from that, I'm still hoping the gameplay, the consequences, and everything like that happen to end up being very good, which is kind of what we're seeing so far with the impressions. Except for one impression, which, although he didn't play it, I still think is valid in some ways.
How can you look at this and think that it's good? How could you do this? Like, I don't understand.
And I love Asman, even though he doesn't agree with me. Watch his video, it's hilarious. But a lot of other content creators that did play the game at the most recent preview event, which was, I believe, a month or so ago at this point, have been very optimistic about the game and absolutely loved what they played so far. And the first thing that a lot of them mention is the consequences of the dialogue and your choices in the game.
But what I will say is they do not shy away from big set pieces, big encounters, story beats, or major moments of consequence, with basically consequence from your decisions that could have a major impact on thousands and thousands of people. You can straight up ruin entire cities based on your choices, and I love it.
But there are choices that you're going to make that are going to play a factor here, and that'll build your adoration for these characters. For example, as someone who did not care too much for Harding in Inquisition, I am ready to die for Harding now. Why is that? Because I made a choice that hurt her badly, really badly. I made a choice where I was like, hey, come on with me into combat, because I'm thinking like this will make our relationship better. And she walked out of it bruised and battered. And this wasn't just a single cutscene moment. Throughout the entire duration of the opening parts of the game, Harding was hurt so bad that you would see it physically, and she was unavailable for a mission.
Now, this is absolutely awesome to me. If you can level complete cities or change the environment based on decisions you make, or you can change the character's mentality, change the characters and what they look like physically due to some of the different decisions you make, man, like that's what I'm really wanting for in terms of the consequences. I need those in an RPG like this when there's different dialogue options, because that really immerses you and makes you not only enjoy the combat of the game, but all of the dialogue and making sure that matters as well. Not only getting the story, but affecting the story on top of that. Now, the next important thing to me is definitely the combat in this game. It's something I am a little bit skeptical on because I think it does look a little bit floaty and lacking of impact. But this is what some people said about the combat.
I'm going to start off by saying this is not the direction that I wanted the Dragon Age franchise to go in. I would much prefer a combat system that favors more tactical elements over crazy, fast-paced action elements for this particular franchise. But I will say, overall, looking back, I did have fun with it on this initial session, but I also feel like it could get old pretty fast. That's kind of how I'm feeling. I also don't think that CRPG lovers are going to like it much, meaning if all you really play are CRPGs, or perhaps if like all you play are really hardcore ARPGs, like Souls games. But if you like more casual action RPG games, I'd say there's probably some fun to be had here for many of you. And to my surprise, there's actually a lot more to the combat than I thought there was going to be.
It's really, really fluid, and I was impressed at just how quickly I was able to get used to it. If I had to compare it to something, I would say that it plays similarly to like God of War 2018 mixed with Assassin's Creed Odyssey with the quick ability wheel. It's an interesting amalgamation, but it does also make sense when you consider when this game was being created and built out, most likely around that 2018 period, where two of the biggest games of that year that were both nominated for Game of the Year were Assassin's Creed Odyssey and God of War 2018. And as a result, they probably took a few nods and ideas from that, things that they thought were working and that players seemed to connect with and really like. And I like both of those games, and I think they play really well, and I'm glad to say that I enjoyed the combat here.
So, despite there being a lot of criticism and a lot of skepticism about Bioware moving towards the action RPG style of combat and moving away from the tactical RPG style of combat you would have come to know in Origins and Inquisition, it is looking relatively good so far, and we have been getting some relatively good impressions. It does look like it might get a little bit boring after a while if you're using the same abilities over and over again. It also looks like it's lacking a little bit of impact and a little bit of weight to that combat, which is something, especially in action RPGs, that I really like. I don't think you're going to have that same type of weight that you're going to feel in like a Dark Souls game like Elden Ring, for example, or even a more focused action RPG game like Black Myth Wukong. But overall, the combat looks relatively good, and I'm at least happy to hear that. Now, the next big thing that I'm excited to see in these hands-on impressions is the environment. It looked very Disney, very colorful, very like high fantasy, but not the dark, gritty fantasy that I have come to know and love about the Dragon Age games. So apparently it is looking like it's going to be that high fantasy Disney type of style, but there's also going to be a lot of dark, gritty brutalness and dark fantasy environments in the game to complement a lot of those kind of like more colorful areas.
Showing you colorful things, vibrant things, and you're like, where's my dark fantasy? The best thing I can say visually I took away from this experience is that Bioware showed some of the flexibility in the art style, and there is a point that you come across a village that is full of the blight, bodies entangled and skewered, and I pretty immediately realized this game does not hesitate to take a dark turn both visually and story-wise.
Now, we'll come to see if this is something that's actually a standard in the game throughout all of the different acts. These people only played Act 1, so we'll have to see if Act 2 and Act 3 carry on some of those dark fantasy environments that we've come to kind of know and love about Dragon Age throughout the past. But the last thing I want to highlight is just the final thoughts overall from myself, but also some of these content creators that played the game, to see if overall that they think this is going to be a bounce back game for Bioware, despite some of the complete blunders they've had previously.
Okay, at the end of this, what are the takeaways? What's my kind of final opinion? I went into this preview event expecting the game to be kind of I expected it to be a reinvention unnecessarily of a formula people already connected with. I figured it would come off as just a less impressive Witcher or God of War clone or Baldur's Gate, adjacent RPG, but they've actually managed to strike their own tone, their own presentation, and I do think there is a pretty sizable market for something like this. People like RPGs, people like fantasy adventure games, and they like high production values too, and this seems to do all of it pretty well, and they are taking active steps to try and remedy the mistakes of years past.
And I feel like I've only scratched the surface in some ways. There's so much I wanted to continue to check and verify, and more than anything, see how Acts 2 and 3 unfold. Because Act 1 had a very much beginning, middle, and end feel where that could have been a game. That could have definitely been a game, but they kept going. And kudos to them if they were holding stuff back for DLC and decided to pack it into this. It seems like Bioware is keenly aware of the situation they're in, if conversations I had with the development team were anything to go by. And they kind of know they need to hit a home run here. They know they need to prove to their fans and potentially even their investors that they're worth keeping around. So I feel really good about Dragon Age Veilguard walking away from my preview. And for the first time since Mass Effect 3, I am excited for a Bioware game without looking over my shoulder.
Overall, initial impressions wise, this game is pulling me in so many different directions and it leaves me very conflicted. But as a fan of the franchise as a whole, and as someone who's already gone through the mourning period for wishing that the DA franchise would head more towards the CRPG direction, or more towards the deep, complex RPG direction, I guess I could say, I do find myself still excited to jump back into it on official release. With that said, I just can't confidently say to you all, though, as my audience, that yeah, this is a definite buy. My guess is that this game will unfortunately continue to be quite divisive, but I could be wrong. For myself, the potential story and the world building is a powerful enough force to the DA franchise that I'll be playing it no matter what.
So that's pretty much the impressions coming away of this game so far. Some of the content creators are very impressed. They think this game is going to finally be a game where Bioware is going to step into that field of having a good game aside from their previous horrible games in the past, or at least the 2 games that have come out before this. And then there's also some kind of divisive mixed feelings from some of the other content creators, because this isn't necessarily the Dragon Age that they were looking for, but overall it was still a decent game and kind of gave them enough to at least be relatively excited for when the game comes out. Now, for me, from what I've seen so far, I am still very excited about this game. I think there's a lot going for this game that's positive in terms of the world building, in terms of the lore, in terms of the different consequences and decisions that you're going to be making throughout the game. The combat looks okay to me. I think there's a lot about the combat that I'm excited about, but a lot that I am still very reserved about in terms of, is that combat going to be fun from the start of the game to the end of the game? But overall, I think it's looking relatively good. Now, I still am hating the art style. I think the art style looks terrible. The new designs for some of these characters, specifically the Qunari and the Darkspawn, like I mentioned, look absolutely horrible in my opinion. It's not even just a meh, I just think they're bad. Personally, I think they're bad. Now, that's pretty much my final thoughts as well here. These different content creators do go into some more, like the Lighthouse, which is the main hub of the game, which people are saying looks relatively good, as well as the character creator, which the character creator looks pretty fun as of right now, and looks like there's a lot of different options that you're going to be able to have to create a good character, with a ton of different hair options, which the hair has very good physics to it as well. That's just what I've been hearing, what I've kind of seen so far. But overall, those are my final thoughts about the game. If you guys like this video, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. And also, I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below of what you've been thinking about Dragon Age so far up to this point. Now, if you want to go check out these other content creators, Luke Stevens, Maddie Plays, Wolfhard FPS, as well as Asmongold. Asmongold has a completely different take. Although he hasn't played the game, he has looked at kind of the hands-on preview specifically from IGN about the game and absolutely hated that. So go check out those different content creators. Go make up your own mind about the game before it releases. This is pretty much what I'm thinking as of right now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.